So to set up my document, I'm going to go into File, Document Settings, Document Setup. Oh, I'm going to change my millimeters. Oh, I canceled out of that. To feet and inches, my area to square feet, my volume to cubic feet. I'm gonna go to my dual dimensions just to practice, and I'm gonna hit OK. Then I want to change my layer scale. I want to use my 1/4 inch to a foot. You can see that it goes to about 1:48 here. That's okay. I'm going to hit OK. I also want to change my drawing area. So see, I can see that this is 8. My printable area, so without the margins, is 8 and just over 10. So that's a letter size sheet. I want to go into my printer setup so I can change from US letter into tabloid or 11:17. I also want my orientation not to be portrait, but to be landscape, and I'm going to hit OK. I can see that then now my printable area is 16.5 by 10.5, which is approximately 11:17. My horizontal pages are 1 and 1. I want to make sure that they're 1 and 1. Otherwise, it's going to break our sheet up into multiple pieces. Even if we're not if we go to print it, it's going to separate our drawing in those pieces that it is. Or if we PDF it, it's going to even break up our PDF. So we want to make sure it's 1:1, and that's, if it looks like a bit of a patchwork quilt for your drawing outline or your page outline, that's where you make these changes. So I'm going to hit OK. My drawing line, my grid lines are off, but if I wanted to change them, this is where it would be. I'd want to make sure that I'm in the grid sub menu and my show grid is deselected. And I can make changes to my grid here if I wanted to. I'm going to hit OK. Everything else is good, and I'm going to hit OK. And I can see there's my page. It's now landscape orientation. If I want to fit to that page, I can do the zoom up at the top, fit to page, or Command 4. And because my resolution is modified, it didn't quite do that very well. Okay, so I've set up my document. Now I'm going to go File, Save, or Save As. And this is creating that, saving it in a location, saving the file name, so that when the Vectorworks backs up our document, it knows where to back it up. It'll create the backup folder, and it'll name it the same as you save it. So I'm going to go BT. This BT 110. This is just going to do lines. I'm just going to do lines for right now, and I'm going to go CJ. Okay, I'm saving it in my documents. You can see that file type, it's a Vectorworks drawing file type, which is a DVWX. We will go into different file types later on, but that's what we want to save for right now. So I'm going to save that. And now I should go into File, Documents. Now I can see that there's my file. It's got that little purple icon that the Vectorworks we have for 2018. There's the file that I just saved. It's in my documents. I can see that when I did that, now I have a Vectorworks backup folder. And if I click on that folder, there is that file name. I can see that it maintains the name that I saved it as, then it's backup. And then this here is a date and time stamp. So it's 2018, it's the 9th month, September. Today's date is the 20th, and it's 12:55:32 seconds when I saved this backup. Okay, so if you lose your file, you need to know where to find it. Sometimes you're going to have multiple backup files, and so this is a great way of seeing, differentiating which one's which. Okay, so everybody's been able to save their file. We know, check and make sure that the backup is working, and you can see that it's there. Okay, So last class we went over some navigating our drawing space. So this is our drawing window. We have our basic tool palette, our advanced tool palette, our object info palette, which you want to use and get friendly with and know well, our navigation palette here. Right now I'm in my selection tool. So my cursor is this black arrow. I can see that there's mode menus along the top here. There's actually multiple mode menus. So if you can see, there's like a slight gray vertical line in between some of the icons. That's our menu grouping. So here we have these scaling modes. There's 3 icons for the selection tool, and then there's like a mode menu, and then there's 1 icon, and then there's 3 icons all grouped together and 1 more. So these 3 scaling arrows are our first mode menu group. This just single one on its own is our second. These 3 are the third menus group, and this one is our fourth. So to toggle between those options, the shortcut keys are on the top right hand side of our keyboard, and they're all in sequence, just like the mode menu. So we have U, and then beside it we have I, beside it we have O, and beside that we have P. So this is our first, second, third, fourth, and actually if there is a fifth, then it's our, I'm pretty sure I should check, our left bracket. So if there's just one icon in that menu group, it's going to toggle it on and off. If there's multiple icons in that menu group, it's going to toggle between them. Okay? So you'll want to know those shortcuts. So right now, if I press the U key, and it brings this up, you can turn those off. So pressing U toggles between the 3 different scaling modes. Pressing I turns that one on and off. We won't get into that right now, but pressing the O toggles between the 3. Remember, there's the marquee selection, marquee mode, the lasso mode, and the polygon mode, and pressing the P just toggles that last one on and off. So right now we have nothing to select. If I wanted to draw a line, I'm going to select my line tool, which is 2, shortcut 2. I'm going to click and set my first point. Right now I can draw a line at any angle because I'm in an unconstrained mode, line mode, but by holding Shift, I can then constrain that unconstrained line and draw at specific angles. So right now I'm just drawing a straight line. With my selection tool, X, or X for shortcut, I get my object info, it highlights the line, and I get object handles at either end. I can then either grab it with my stretchy handles and modify my line. I can change the angle. When I'm changing and scaling my line, I can also, it works the same way as creation. So I can, if I don't press anything, I can change this line to any angle. If I hold Shift, it's going to lock into the existing line. Also, if it's an angled line, and this is, for instance, I can see my angle here is negative 154.44. Say I really wanted to keep that angle, I can use my stretchy handle and hold Shift, and that locks that angle. If I don't hold Shift, it can easily move off that angle, but holding Shift, it constrains it to the angle that I've created that line at. So I'm just going to create another line. Navigating around, right now I'm pressing down on my scroll wheel button to temporarily pan my screen. My selection tool again, you can see that the selection tool is usually a black arrow. If I hover over an object, it's white, and it's basically telling me that the cursor is over an object. If I wanted to, I could just grab that object. But if I click off the object, it just does my marquee to select for the selection tool. Okay, so I want to make sure it's white. I can click. And if I'm on my crosshairs this time, if I press Option, I can copy that line without redrawing it. So it's click, Option, drag. I can either press the Option key before I click and I get this little plus sign beside my cursor, or I can grab my line, and as long as I press down my Option key before I let go of my mouse, I then duplicate my object. I can press it, turn it on and off, no matter what, as long as when I lift my mouse button, I have my Option key, it duplicates that. So with my selection tool, I can draw my marquee, and everything within my marquee is selected. Or if I hit the Option key, it's everything that marquee crosses, it selects. So now I have multiple objects selected, and I can see that there's no stretchy handles because I'm in my single object interactive scaling mode. If I wanted to toggle that and go to my multiple object scaling mode, then I could then scale all these objects at the same time. It's going to apply the same scale. So if they're at different angles or different lengths, it's not necessarily going to keep them the same or change them in the same way. It's going to scale them in the same to the same magnification. So I have some lines. I can also draw rectangles. So if I wanted to use, I could just use lines and snap my lines around. I can go up into this point of reference and it says endpoint. There's a smart endpoint. And if I bring this down, it says that I'm horizontal, aligning with the horizontal alignment and H. I can click there. So I've created a rectangle. If I select this rectangle, it actually tells me that I have 4 lines. Okay, it's not actually a rectangle. It's 4 lines in the shape of a rectangle. It's not a rectangular object. If I want to create a rectangular object, I need to use the rectangle tool. And what I can just do, if I want to create it the same size, I can just click from each of the diagonals, and now I have a rectangle. And it tells me up in my object info palette, I have a rectangle. I can apply a fill if I want to because it has a plane, a face. And using my selection tool, I can also modify it if I want. I can change, move it from the sides. I can use the diagonal. Holding shift again is going to constrain it. So that means it's symmetrical. So if it's symmetrical, it's actually creating a square instead of a rectangle. Now I created this rectangle over my lines. I can't see them, but we want to try and keep our drawings clean and neat and with as little information as possible. So I might have used my lines to draw the outline of the shape that I wanted to create, but now I've created a rectangle and I want to get rid of the lines I originally used. So I can't actually, if I click, I know they're behind there, but I can only click the object that is in the foreground. Okay, so I could move it out of the way and then see my lines here and delete them that way. I'm going to undo this, so Command Z. Or what I can do is I can alter the arrangement of these objects. So there's a stacking order. as we create our object, so even that first line is in front of I created first, so this second one is in front of that first line. This third line is in front of the second, and if they had a fill and an overlap, and you can see the overlap, it does matter when we kind of get into other operations, stacking orders of lines. So we can change that and see right now, because I had my line already selected, it's as I moved my rectangle back, it's highlighted behind, but I couldn't grab it. I can see it's there, but I can't actually grab it. So what I can do is select my rectangle, and I can send it backward or to the back. So if I go up into my modify menu, there is send commands. So there's send to front, send forward, send to back, send backward. Where you're gonna need to know those. They're kind of universal if these commands are in other programs, say like even I think they're in Word and Photoshop and all of that. So you're gonna want to remember those commands. So send to front, or in this case I want to send to back. So I'm gonna go Command B. And now I can grab those lines, and even here, this line, because the rectangle is in the back, I can't select my rectangle where this line overlaps it, because the line is in the foreground, so it's going to select the most forward object. Okay. So we can play with that too if we we can clip and add surfaces. So we need to be aware of the stacking order. So for instance, right now, this gives a totally different look than if I bring this rectangle to the foreground, right? So we can kind of play with that. There's different instances where we're gonna need to play with that. But right now, just with basic shapes, we can do that. Excuse me. So again, the rectangle has 4 different modes for creating a rectangle. It's just one menu group there. So if you want to toggle between those, you press U again to change your rectangle, how your rectangle gets created. Excuse me. One shape we're going to use a lot, and it is a method for using different modes and different tools, is the polygon. So it's this, like, I think it kind of looks like a crown. It's a 2D polygon tool, and if you hover over that, it says that shortcut key is 8. So I'm going to use 8 and press my polygon tool, and it selects that. I can see that it has 3 methods or modes for this tool. The first one is a vertex mode, so we can create any type of polygon. I could create a triangle, for instance, and it's a continuous action. So I'm just gonna, my first click locks in that first vertex. My second click locks in the second one, and I can go to that one. And either double clicking ends the operation. Or if you close it on another vertex. So in this case, I created a triangle. I could also create a square or a rectangle. If I didn't want to use the rectangle tool, I can also do it. This is gonna be when we do walls. This is one method of doing those operations. So we want to understand how to use this polygon tool. Oh, sorry. So it looks like a rectangle, but if I look up in my object info palette, it says it's a polygon. So they kind of operate a bit differently. They'll have different options. So this one says rectangle. I can see that I can change my width and height. There's those reference points that I was talking about last class. It gives me also the perimeter of that shape and the area. So those settings that we changed, right now the area is in square feet. So if we're laying out our areas and then we want to use the square feet if we're trying to approximate room sizes and areas. Now, if I select my polygon, it looks totally different. I still have these reference points. There's no length and width. I can add vertex, I can delete vertex, I can reverse direction. I can make it a closed shape, or I can deselect that and make it an open shape. So, or if I've created a shape and I didn't intentionally close it, but I want it closed, you can easily select that option and it does that for you. I can show direction, so I can see that in this case I went in a clockwise direction, and then that reverse direction will go in the other way. We'll play with that a bit more, but just know what is kind of in those, in the object info palette in regards to the polygon tool. So polygon tool again, or 8, I can, here for instance, I have my 4 lines that I created that rectangle with. I could go around with using my polygon tool and click on the vertex and draw my shape that way. I can also use this paint bucket tool. So it's an inner boundary mode. So it's just gonna, if I select that option or press U, now it's gonna take those lines as bounding objects and it's gonna create a polygon within that shape. So instead of doing 4 clicks, I just do 1 and I have that same shape. I might not have fit that in. I know, it's very helpful. And so that's the inner boundary mode. There's also an outer boundary mode, or a lasso again. So I can go around my object and create a polygon that way. So if we have a complex object, or even around our walls, we can do it that way. If we have a simple space that we want to fill, there's the fill bucket. We'll find this you'll find all those modes useful. So maybe just give it a try right now. Drawing a polygon. So draw different size polygons. Use guidelines like your lines to use the inner boundary mode and use the outer boundary mode. Try closing your object knot, and if you want to play with the other buttons, give that a try too.